Alright, gonna look at Red November. I played this once with my wife and kind of enjoyed it. And then I don't think we played it again. Maybe we did, but and I think we won in our game. It's a co-op game. You're playing on a sub full of little gnomes. They don't look terribly interesting. The little pictures here are kind of cute. And then this is to mark how drunk they are. Briefly going over some of the pieces. Well, you got your submarine here, and it kind of looks like, you know, it kind of reminds me of, say, Awful Green Things type game in terms of just this initial image here. But it's not that kind of game at all. It's actually basically lots of bad things are happening aboard the submarine. And your goal is to kind of either survive long enough that the sub gets rescued, or, well, towards the end of that survive long enough, you could escape from a hatch and get to the rescuers in time. And you have a number of major factors bothering you here, like the temperature. I think this is energy. This is the engines, maybe. I don't know. We'll get to that when we hit the rules. And eventually there might be a Kraken coming after you. And these are all have timed issues where the sub will be destroyed if you don't fix it. Basically, if these get to the worst or if the Kraken comes up. You have possible flooding leaks. Fires can be set inside territories. These are blocked hatches that would make it difficult for the gnomes to run around. It's a pile of booze, because obviously, you know, when you've got a catastrophe on your hands, the best thing to do about it is to get drunk before you try to fix anything. But being drunk has some negative effects, of course, but it also has some positive advantages to it. And you've got a couple of these player aid cards. Give you a summary of the different actions. This is an action point type game where you spend actions doing things, or action points doing things, in the sequence of your turn. Alright, now I am going to go over the rules, and then here's a summary of basically all the different chips that are available in here, and then I'll also cover it in the rules. I am going to go over the rules, although I would probably suggest that anybody who's looking at this immediately stop, maybe fast forward to the end if I have any words after that, and go to somebody else's rules overview. I saw there were a few there. Starlight Citadel did one. I know they're usually pretty good. I don't know if they cover the whole of the rules, but they give a pretty good overview and idea of what the game's going to be about. If you're watching mine, you're probably watching just for the playthrough. But I have not read the rules in a while. I skimmed over them a little bit here, and really I find it very, very difficult to do that when I know that I'm going to cover the rules, and I know that I'm more likely to actually learn the rules by covering them, as we saw with, what the hell was it I just played? Rail game, New England Railways, where if I had read through the rules on camera, I would have done a better job. Okay. Unfortunately, these rules are not terribly good. First of all, they're in this tiny little book. That works well with the small box. This is a box maybe a little too big for most travel purposes. And, this is a game that could have been packaged in one of the old Steve Jackson game, pocket game type setups. But hey, this isn't too bad. I could fit this in my green army coat pretty easily. So it is something, you know, and it doesn't take up a lot of table space. I wouldn't be using two tables, except my table legs are stuck in place now. But it doesn't take up a lot of table space, so you could bring this to a coffee shop and play it there very easily, or whatever, you know. And pieces are fairly heavy. The cards maybe not so much, but you could probably get away with playing this even outside. Alright. So let's take a look at some of the factors here. Each player has a little figure they're going to run around on the board with. They also have this little timekeeper. Now, there's an innovative idea of time in this game, which is each player gets to do things with their action points. That burns time. And then the next player gets to catch up and maybe even surpass that time. There's possibilities where there's disasters in place which will destroy the ship. And you can't fix that problem after the ship is due to be destroyed with it. We'll see how that all works out when we hit the rules. Little gnome card, like I said, it covers the intoxication levels on it. Showing little pictures of how drunk the gnome is. This is the deck of event cards. Some of these will be bad events, like fires and stuff breaking out. Some of them are going to be draws from here, I think. We'll see how that works out. And then each card also has a feint check number, which is used to check to see if your gnome passes out, depending on how drunk he is. I don't remember how those work, though. Oh, we have a 10-sided die, and we got to remember that the 10 on it is, like the 0 is a 10 on it. I hate this little booklet. I've done the setup already mostly. I haven't put gnomes in place. Where do they go? On a random room. So normally I play with a full complement of players possible for a game, but in this case I think I'm just going to play with 4 players. It changes where people start in terms of the time. So 3 to 5 players have 60 turns. If you're playing with more people, you get less time because you've got more gnomes actions to solve the problems in time or cause problems or something. Okay. So in this game, the player who is the furthest back in time, the closest to the 60, gets to go next. And whoever's on top of the stack of people at that time point gets to go next. I think when you first reach a stack, you go to the bottom of that stack. So you go later because you reached it more recently. Okay. So normally you get to take an action or actions. And yeah. Fucking annoying. Here's your sequence of play, I guess, for each player's turn. First you get to move, but then we go into the item tile. So everybody's going to be starting with 2 of those, which give you certain advantages and disadvantages, or advantages as you play, opportunities you can take. When you move, you place the white ghost time marker, let's say on blue, on top of your player marker. And that's going to track how much time you've spent on your turn. And you move that forward as you do things, which will indicate how many events happen, which happen on these red stars. I think these black stars also trigger something. I'd flip through the book to find, but then the book would pop up and not be useful anymore. This is not a good... the little format is hard to read from, even though it has its advantages. Okay. So you have costs for these different things: opening a hatch, refill. Well, there we go again. Yeah, whatever. Opening a hatch, reflowing water, whatever. These are all listed in here for movement. And then each of these is going to be described in detail. A gnome can open an unblocked hatch. This will allow him to walk through the door for another movement point, right? Entering a room, optional, 0 to 1M, or leave the sub. I don't know. We'll have to get to that to see what that 0 to 1M is. Okay, reflowing water. If you've got 2 rooms connected, and maybe one of them's flooded, like this, you can spend effort to, well, it doesn't cost anything, to split it so that there's water in both, but it's not flooded in either. and that kind of equalizes them. That will, if water is added to a fire, it'll put out the fire, which is kind of cool. And you can never move water in or out of an exterior hatch. Those are pressure sealed. Entering a room, okay, you have to open the hatch, and after you open the hatch, you're allowed to go through it, but if you don't, it'll close at the end of your movement. Now, you could have opened it just to reflow water, and here we go again. So normally it doesn't cost anything to enter a room, but if the room's on fire, you can only enter it if you have the fire extinguisher or if you've got grog that you've drunk. If it's high water, you can't enter the room at all, but if it's low water, it costs you a minute to enter the room. You can leave the sub. This costs you 1 minute of action if you opened the exterior hatch first, and you must have the aqua lung item played on you. It takes a minute to get back into the sub. You should try to stay outside the sub for a particular period of time, because if you stay out too long, you'll run out of air. These rules are kind of humorously written and therefore not necessarily well placed, and I need a seat because this is exhausting trying to read this little book. So there's two main types of actions. A fix-it action. So a fix-it action is going to be listed here per item, and it's going to cost you, okay, well, we'll see. I used to, I've played it, but you add modifiers from item tiles and try to fix, then you roll a die. If you succeed, that's great. You decide how many minutes you want to spend. That can be from 1 to 10. And then you have to roll less than or equal to the sum of the time and any modifiers from tiles you have. I don't know what this +2 is on here. Maybe we'll see an answer somewhere. And token actions, unblock hatch, extinguish fire, pump water. That's to remove tokens from the map, the water, fire, or hatch blocks. Room actions, fixing the engine, the oxygen pumps, the reactor, stopping a missile launch, or killing the Kraken. However, if your room is on fire, you can only extinguish the fire. This is +2 if you've got low water in there. I can see that if I look real carefully. That's water. That's the same as on there. And that's probably covered somewhere in here, or maybe not. Token fix-it actions, fire, flood, and block hatches. You can do these anywhere where they're valid. And if you succeed in fixing, you get rid of the problem. Okay, and let's bend this back again. Okay, you can only do it if the room's on fire. It's your only option while you're in a room that's on fire other than leaving. If you successfully fix it, you remove the fire token. If the extinguish fire fails, you must make a supplemental move to exit the room immediately, spending the time as normal. If you're unable to exit the room, you'll die. Pump water happens only if you've got a low water token in it. If you do a successful fix, you remove the low water token and you're pumping the water outside the sub. Okay. And extinguish fire doesn't have a problem due to water, and pump water already is counting that there's water in there. Fix it in a room. There's disaster tracks. That's these three things here, which track how bad things are. Each of those correspond to problems in particular rooms. Asphyxiation is the oxygen pumps. And damned if I know which color's which. There's some way of telling. I don't know. Maybe that's green. Heat is the reactor. Now, I think that's heat. Maybe this is asphyxiation. Okay, room 2. Now, room 2 is this dial, so that's asphyxiation. Heat is the reactor, room 4. That's going to be the energy looking thing. And pressure is the engine, which is the third track, so they are in order. Oxygen just looks like whatever. If any disaster track marker reaches the end of its disaster track, the game ends immediately. The Red November is destroyed and everybody loses. If you do one of these successfully, you drop the track marker to the next lower reset point on the disaster track, i.e. to the 5th space if you're on 6th or higher, to the star, or all the way back to the start if you're below, if you're here or lower. So you don't want to let it get up to here because then it's expensive to fix that one space. That's one of the things we learned playing it. Time destruction, these 4 time destruction tokens, that's these big time markers here. And these are prevented by the main fixes here or by killing the Kraken if he's the thing. If your timekeeper passes a destruction token, if all the players' timekeeper markers, the little bulbs that keep track of how much time they've spent, pass the destruction marker, the game ends immediately and everybody loses. You are unable to prevent a destruction once you move past that destruction token on the time track, and you'll fail any such attempt if your timekeeper passes it as the attempt's made. So if you're trying to do a fix, you get to pick how much time you want to spend on the fix, but you can't go past that destruction marker on that fix or it will fail. There are equipment stores in room 8, and there's a little symbol for that. That matches the symbol on the back of these item tokens. And there's additional stuff in the captain's cabin, the grog. And you can do the draw item tiles action. I wonder where that is on here. Okay, well, we'll see. It takes a minute per item that you draw. If you're in the captain's cabin, you draw from the captain's private stash of grog, unless it's been used, and you can spend up to 2 minutes doing that. If you're in the equipment stores, you can try to grab some gear. You can spend up to 4 minutes, and you'll be drawing from the bag of items. You cannot draw tiles again in that room before you first do an action in some other room. Of course, you can bop back and forth, but there's a problem with that because there's a limit to how much stuff you can carry. To note that you've already equipped, you place your gnome actually on the little marker to indicate that you took them. There might be a problem because the gnomes are rather large compared to the size of the board. You can also trade item tiles with another player, and you can give as many as you like from your hand and take as many as the other person's willing to give you. This takes 1 minute for the active player to exchange items like that. There are other actions that are possible. You can take no action and just waste a minute in order to allow other people to act next. If your timekeeper's past the space mark 10 on the track, you can abandon comrades. If you get your gnome into the sea space outside the sub, requiring the aqualung, you can swim for safety. And this uses up all your remaining time. And then your victory condition is the opposite of everyone else. You're not interested in saving the sub anymore. In fact, you want it to be destroyed because then you'll be the sole survivor. If you run away and you're cowardly and the sub gets saved anyway, well, you're going to probably be court-martialed. And you don't want to know what gnomes do in torture. Situational modifiers to actions. Okay, on fire, you can only extinguish the fire. Low water, anything you do except pump water or sit on and twiddle your thumbs takes 2 extra minutes, and that's marked on here. We noted that. High water, the only possible action you can do there is no action. Now remember, that doesn't count as movement. Movement summary is something different. These are the actual actions. So you can't fix high water, except you could open the hatch and reflow water with your movement summary to splash it away. Eventually, if you're stuck in a room in high water, you will die. Here's the summary here. If you have one or more grog tiles that you drink during your turn, you have to make a feint check. To do so, you draw an event card and you check the feint number, and we have one of them here. If there's a dash, you automatically pass. Otherwise, if the number is equal to or less than your current intoxication level, you pass out. The event card will be discarded and the event is ignored, which could be cool. That could get rid of something really painful, actually. If the gnome passes out, you lay down, and your ghost goes forward 10 spaces. When your turn comes around again, you stand back up. But in the time there, you might die. Like if it catches on fire or floods, you'll die from that if you're sleeping. And yeah, I've been that drunk, so I can't say that's wrong. Although sometimes you do wake up, man, in absolute terror. I've never had anything too bad happen while I'm that way without waking up. A gnome who wakes up, but gnomes are of course different, who wakes up retains the intoxication level he had when he passed out. Only coffee will sober a gnome, and that's untrue too. Terror is a great sobering factor. So I've got some real issues here with the realism of this game, okay? But it is a steam-powered submarine too. Not that there weren't coal-powered ones. Okay, tracking intoxication. When you're not intoxicated, you've got your sober side face up, but when you're intoxicated, you mark yourself this way, and you get more and more drunk. During the final phase of the turn, your timekeeper catches up to the ghost timekeeper. So let's say I spent, 4 actions. Well, then I'd slide forward 4, go to the bottom of the stack, I believe. But I have to stop at each event marker and draw items, and I don't remember which is which. I think these are the draw items and these are the events. Let's see. Somewhere it probably tells me. It's got this tiny little picture here. It says time track. Draw items is the little black thing. Events are the red stars. That is as I remembered. That's the worst situation. As you hit an event marker, as you hit an event marker, you draw an event card and resolve its effects. If you play a lucky charm, you're allowed to ignore 3 event markers in a row. For each draw item marker reached, you draw an item tile and add it to your hand. On the occasion where both event and draw items are found in the same space, you resolve the event card before drawing the item. If the event deck is exhausted, you shuffle and make a new event deck. The first time you reshuffle, the Kraken goes in the deck, adding an additional problem. Now, the one thing I don't remember is how much time you can spend on your turn. And I'm going to have to look that up. Kicking the bucket, ways you can die. We've already mostly gotten rid of those. Yeah. All right, I'm going to have to split this into 2 anyway, so I'm going to look that up during this split. I don't know, I couldn't find it. I think what it is you just, as long as you're doing single actions, as soon as you pass someone else or end up in the same stack underneath them as you would when you enter the stack, someone else's position on the track, now it's their turn. But if you're doing a big action, like 10 minutes on something, you could go quite far beyond them before losing the rest of your turn. You kind of want to time how long your turn's going to go, so you kind of want to take your actions in order to push you into certain places on here for event draws or whatever, because there are some advantages to that. Okay. I don't remember where we were. This is where it says we were in my head. The time destruction events, we already kind of handled that. The room events. Okay. So yeah, these come up on the cards. The time destruction event can move this forward. And eventually, so fires are going to add to the asphyxiation track, which makes sense. Events descent and fast descent just out of the card add to pressure, reactor warm up and reactor malfunction will add to heat. The time destruction events, once you eventually hit once certain events come up, they cause the event marker to be placed relative to the space in which it's played, 10 to 15 spaces in the future. And if this goes past rescued, then the destruction marker doesn't matter. You'll be saved in time. No. Yeah, so if these ever reach, they immediately destroy you. So there's multiple ways that you get destruction, but some of them involve these same things where you have to deal with the reactor or whatever. That's why I got confused there. Okay, specific events. When a fire starts, you randomly determine where the fire is. If it's already flooded, then there's no new fire. If it's not flooded, asphyxiation goes up by 1, even if there's already a fire token in it. And then it gets a fire token if it doesn't have one. However, there's also the possibility of fire spreading events where you, in case of a fire spreading, candidate rooms are those next to the room that are already on fire, but the room that's on fire, but are neither on fire or flooding, and you pick one of your choice from the candidates that increases asphyxiation and puts a token there. If there's no place for it to go, there's no effect, and not even on the asphyxiation track. For flooding events, there's 2 kinds of flooding events, new flooding and increased flooding. When flooding is called for, you roll a die, and the flooding of that room goes to high water from whatever it was. If it was on fire, the fire is extinguished. Doesn't help your asphyxiation though. When existing flooding increases, all rooms that are currently flooded at low water go up to high water. That could be very bad if you've spread the water out. Blocked hatch, a random block, the active player, this is not random, gets to select a non-blocked hatch adjacent to the room to block. You can't do exterior hatches. If all hatches adjacent to the selected room already have blocked hatch tokens, no additional token is placed. So you roll the die for the room, and then the active player gets to choose which one's blocked. Hand limit events, every now and then there'll be cards that come up that say, hey, you're boned, and you drop down to a certain number of cards, counters. And in the case of stumble, it only affects a single player. Overheated event, all players who are able to must play a grog tile. They're thirsty. They get no bonus, but they get the extra intoxication levels. There's a respite event card. When this happens, you discard the card without any event effect. The sub has items. Now remember, you get these when you hit the item draw spaces. I don't think there are any in the event cards. The events are just bad. And these give you certain bonuses. For example, grog allows you to enter a room that's on fire, gives you +3 to fix-it actions, but you get to increase your intoxication as well, and you make a feint check during the next feint check phase. The toolbox gives you bonuses on specific fixes, and that's what a lot of these are going to do. The engine manual, the pump manual, the reactor manual, they all give you bonuses. Deactivation for stopping the missile launch. Crowbar gives you a bonus on blocking. Fire extinguisher gives you a bonus to extinguishing fire. Water pump, a bonus to pumping water. Coffee drops your intoxication level by 2. The Aqualung allows you to leave the sub. How long does it allow you? It's a single action's worth of time outside the sub. I don't know what that means. See kicking the bucket, page 16. Okay. I thought there would be a specific amount of time. you start and end your turn outside the sub, you run out of air. So you want to make sure that you go out of the sub and maybe can do something. Oh, you're only allowed one action in a turn sequence? Is that what it is? Shit, I don't know. That's the thing I wanted to look up, and I can't see it. Here we go. Yeah, I think you're allowed to do one action, and then you get another turn afterwards if you're below the other player. So you can do movement and an action or something. I have no fucking clue. I do not like this rule book. It's, you know, it's not up to wargaming snuff. That's all that it is. Time operates a little differently. You know, I mean... yeah, you get several turns in a row. So what do you get here? The player turn. Yeah, I think you can move as far as you like. Yep. Yeah, you get to move as far as you like during your phase and then take an action or something. Now we'll come back over here. Fold the book again. Fold it some more because it won't lay flat. Great. Okay. The diving gun. This allows you a bonus to kill the Kraken. I wonder if you have to be outside to use it. Maybe. Maybe that's the kill Kraken action. Well, we'll look for that. Yeah. It's a fun game, it's just this little rule book sucks. Okay, that's movement. Let's go back to actions. There's fix it. Is that an item action? Maybe. No, it's a time destruction. What's that? Yeah, you know what? Yeah, you have to be outside the sub to do a kill Kraken. Okay, now we go back here and we fold the rule book again and put things on top of it and hope that we can read it. Alright, Lucky Charm, you're allowed to ignore 3 event markers you encounter on one turn. That's kind of cool if you take a long turn to fix things. Okay, you can lose this game in a lot of ways. One is if the disaster track, if one of them goes to the end of the track, or if the players all pass the time to destruction event, or if all the gnomes die. You win if all the timekeepers of surviving gnomes reach the rescued space at the end of the time track and all events have been resolved without causing the game to be lost. Which to me means that your timed event, yeah, the timed event wouldn't be on the track if it's past the rescue marker. So the timed event has to be solved or else you will have lost already anyhow. So that's not really adding anything to the rules. It's just more words. And it's remarkably verbose for how simple a game it is. Okay, so the one thing is, if a player left the sub to be rescued, they win only if all the other players lose. Okay, so there's a possibility there. Now, there doesn't seem to be any I win more than you. It is truly a cooperative unless somebody leaves the sub. Okay, they've got some optional rules for less deadly dying, which allows your gnome to come back after he dies. We're not going to play with that. Crazed Gnomes. That sounds cool. You can play the crowbar item and your gnome in the same room as another gnome and take an attack gnome action. It takes a minute, plus 2 additional minutes if the room's flooded. The defending player can play a crowbar in response to defend himself, even though it's not his turn. If he doesn't do so, he's killed. The defending player does play a crowbar. Each player rolls a die and subtracts his current intoxication level. The high roller's gnome slays the low roller's gnome, with ties going to the attacker. The winner takes the loser's item tiles. Why would you do this? Damned if I know. To make the game more challenging, instead of playing Respite in the discard pile, remove them from play. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to leave the Respites. This is not an easy, trivial game. So I've got the Crazed Gnome rule in play. Why would you do that? Well, I don't know. Just to be an ass. Anyway, I'm going to play a 4-player game of this. It's going to be a lot more fun than trying to wade through those rules were. And yeah, if you waded through them all with me, I apologize. Nobody should listen to this, but I do it as kind of a habit. I've gotten used to explaining the rules on camera in order to fully remember the game. Otherwise, I'd have to sit and just read the rules. And while I would do that for some things, it's much harder for a game like this to just pick up and say, yeah, I'm going to play it, and I will sit and read the rules. Chances are I would just sit down, play it without learning the rules again, and screw around and make mistakes, and that would be fine, but I don't want to do that on camera either. So this is kind of my way of making sure that I'm playing the game partially correctly on the playthroughs. Also, in some games, nobody's done a rules explanation. Nobody's done anything. I do so many games that just have no coverage at all. This one, of course, is one of the more Euro-ish type games. So a lot of people have hit it. It's fairly modern. But that's okay. I get what I need out of it, and anybody silly enough to listen to all this gets what they deserve.